Hi, beautiful people. Welcome to the Fort Salem Library, where we read you your fanfiction. So sit down or don't, relax or don't, and enjoy these stories in a way you have not before. We at Fort Salem Library do not own Motherland Fort Salem or any of the related characters. The Motherland Fort Salem series is created by Elliot Lawrence and owned by Freeform. This story is a work of fanfiction and is meant for entertainment only. We are not making any profit from these stories. All rights of the original Motherland Fort Salem story belong to Freeform. We also do not own Small or any of its original characters and storylines. We did, however, get permission from the author to read their story. This story was created and written by Gesshoo, and you can find the link in our show notes. This story is being read to you by Dani.
Small, Chapter 1. The cold water shock of the Camaria's brazen return, seeping out of the wood around them like termites seeking something new to devour, was nothing compared to that of the fingers curling around her shoulder. It held hardly a breath of weight compared to the heaviness of those two little words, sinking and sinking through Sarah's skin and into her soul. Take me. No, she wanted to say, no! But there was too much pain in her body, too much age in her bones. Teresa's life, her essence, her energy was webbed and sticky, coating Sarah's insides with bitter and black, then seeping and seeping through her skin and out into nothing. Gone. And now there was grief in Sarah's throat, there was grit in her voice, and she could say nothing, nothing, as her remaining biddies began to sing, and Tally Craven's perfect, powerful youth rushed in like a saving breath. Surface broken. No, she wanted to say, no! But there were shadows looming, and warped work dusted the air, and Sarah was slicing a man in half before Tally had even managed to blink her newly aged eyes open again. But her voice, Tally's still young voice, spilled thickly into Sarah's mind, a reckless current. What have I done? What have I done? What have I done? And there was no time for no's, or why's, or you should have's, or you shouldn't have's. No time for grief, or gratitude, or regret. But Sarah dropped to her knee again anyway. She cupped Tally's wrinkled cheek, so different under her fingertips, and yet, oddly, the same. There was no time, but Sarah made time. "Oh, my love," she whispered under the scream of the winds whipping up around them. She knew Tally would hear, if not her voice, then certainly her mind, her care, her terribly aching heart. "We will fix this." Tally's shaky hands curled around Sarah's wrists and steadied. Her eyes, the same warm brown, but cloudy, confused, panicked, wandered briefly before they caught on Sarah's and held. Tally's lips moved wordlessly, but her voice, cracked and scared, whispered across Sarah's mind again. "Sarah?" Sarah's chest tightened, her stomach sank. "Don't be afraid," she said. "This feeling will pass." The Camarilla would be coming to any moment, regrouping any second, any second. Sarah looked up, gathering locations in a glimpse, clocking her team in a blink. "We need to go." There was no time, no time. And Tally, her one, her person, her savior, her love, just a bit closer. Tally wrapped around her mind like a hot, desperate embrace, closer than they'd ever been. "Collar! Bellwether!" They touched Tally with hands as shaky as Tally's own, but they were strong in their support of her. "Come on, Tally," Abigail said, and caught Sarah's eyes for just a moment. "All fear, all fire, all at once." Sarah felt much the same. "Go," she said, reassuring others when she couldn't herself. "She will be fine. Go." Sarah put her back to them, scourge at the ready. Her insides were pitch and terror, and goddess help anyone who dared attempt to touch her or what belonged to her. These witches, these hearts, they were hers to protect. They were getting on that bat, all of them remaining, and they were going to make it home unscathed. If she had to, Sarah would rend this desert in halves to see it done. "I didn't know what else to do," she heard Tally say as she was shuffled towards the bat. "I couldn't lose her." Sarah's eyes began to sting again, pierced with tears. "You did good, Tal," Rael's raspy voice soothed, and Sarah felt the comfort of it in her own bones. Tally, in her sister's arms, and with her own essence still wrapped so tightly around Sarah's mind and heart, began to ease. She began to calm, adjusting more with each step. And by the time they were climbing into the bat, Tally's voice was slithering through Sarah's head again. "Sarah, don't feel guilty," she said, and her voice sounded so terribly exhausted, tinged with fear, but also undeniably with conviction. "I chose you, and I would choose you again." How everything had gone so utterly, epically to shit in such a short period of time, Sarah didn't care. She'd long since surpassed trying to understand the misfortunes of life or love or war. They puddled her pathways for centuries, no matter how she tried to shape the way, and the whys never mattered in the end anyway. What did matter? Tally. Tally Craven had mattered more to her than any one person had managed to in longer than Sarah could recall. Since that first moment, that first dance, that first touch, that first night. Beltane. No one was more shocked than Sarah when the reel began, and an almost instant pull erupted inside her. Like a flower bursting into bloom, then turning, pulling, bending towards the sun. Well, no one was more shocked, except, perhaps, the young woman the reel pulled her to. When Sarah ended the dance with a relatively unknown, unranked witch in her arms, all wild auburn curls and dimpled, blushing cheeks, eyes wide, so wide with wonder. Well, the breathless silence of those who'd still been standing in attendance said all. And Sarah and Tally, both shocked and panting, had stared at one another like two dying things, half mad with thirst, and the shock was nothing. It was nothing compared to that thirst. It was nothing. But that witch, that auburn hair and those wide eyes, that first timid kiss, those trembling, inexperienced fingers down the column of Sarah's throat, that first night, ugh. That first night with Tally Craven had been everything. The start of something intangible, incomparable, something Sarah never would have dreamed could be possible for her. The first sight of that pulsing, evergreen thread spilling from her chest and from Tally's, and meeting effortlessly in the middle. Something so precious, so rare, so utterly unfathomable. That first night with Tally Craven, it had changed Sarah's life. And now, here she was, staring at her newly minted octogenarian of a lover, feeling change like a stone in her gut, a weight that wouldn't shift or dissipate. "Sarah, please stop." Sarah blinked. She pulled herself from her own head and tried to summon a smile. It felt wrong, so she leveled it. Tally hated lies, even well-intentioned ones. Tally was looking at her with soft eyes, an adorable sag to her old cheeks. She reached over the desk for Sarah's hand, and Sarah gave it easily. "You have nothing to feel guilty for," Tally told her, but Sarah felt guilty anyway. Tally rolled her eyes. "What did I just say?" Sarah grimaced. She was shit at keeping her feelings to herself, at least internally. The biddies were constantly telling her to breathe and relax, and build a bridge and get the fuck over it already, Sarah. Babe? Sarah's nose wrinkled, and Tally giggled. Her laugh was aged but lovely, and there was a beautiful rasp that unnatural time had worn into her melody. Sarah loved her, all her sounds, all her variety, even that which wasn't hers to hold inside. Even Sarah's pressed-in, absorbed, sacrificed for, trapped inside Tally's body as if it belonged to her, as if it was her burden to share. It wasn't. It wasn't. But Sarah loved her for sharing it. She loved her. You know I hate that, Sarah said, and a few of the biddies laughed with Tally. The sounds mingled, sang in Sarah's ears like something soothing, nurturing, the kind of music that reminded and remedied. Well, then stop being such a grump, Tally said, and Sarah scoffed. Tally, you are a biddy, she said, exasperated. My girlfriend is now my biddy, and the only way to change that is to allow Isadora to tinker to her heart's content with my heart's life force. You'll forgive me for being a grump? Sarah sighed, concerned. Tally stood, a little wobbly on her old legs for a moment, then rounded Sarah's desk. She urged Sarah's chair back, then settled onto her lap. They flowed around each other like water, natural, instinctual. Tally's arms wringing Sarah's neck, Sarah's wringing Tally's thickened, softened waist. You're grumpy, Tally said, and pressed a gentle kiss to Sarah's forehead. But it's cute how you called me your heart. Sarah grumbled and buried her face in the crook of Tally's neck. She smelled different. Different but the same. It was odd the way time, even a blink of time, could alter things. People, senses. Sarah's own scent was part of Tally now, like a mark. She found it strangely comforting and off-putting all at once. I will be fine. Tally's voice dropped to a gentle whisper. She stroked her fingers over the bumpy length of Sarah's braid. Like you said, I'm strong. And Isadora is brilliant. She knows what she's doing. Sarah only grumbled again and tightened her arms around Tally's waist, drawing a laugh up from Tally's throat. But if you're that worried about it, I could just stay a biddy, she teased, and gave Sarah's braid a short tug. Unless you're not attracted to 80-year-old me. Is that why you offered the reversal? Her laugh grew, brightened, echoed beautifully around the office when Sarah snorted against her throat. You're a pain in my ass either way, Sarah said and kissed Tally's neck. Kissed up to the space behind her ear, just over her witch's mark. You're the one who won't be able to hack it as an 80-year-old. I give it a week before you're whining about your joints. Yarrow was complaining about her knees within the first 48 hours of her transition. I mean, I only gave you, like, my entire youth, Yarrow's voice droned in, and for once, Tally heard it as well. Her knowing laugh in Sarah's ear was so lovely, so comforting. Think I'm entitled to complain about your old ass making my knees hurt. I think I'm doing pretty good so far, Tally laughed. It's not too bad, though I'm a little worried about developing vaginal dryness. Sarah dropped her forehead into Tally's chest and groaned through a laugh. Tally! What the shit is vaginal dryness? Yarrow's voice floated in again, and Licious' familiar drawl answered. Sounds like a civilian problem to me. Sarah laughed out loud, the first bright burst of joy she felt in over 48 hours. And Tally laughed with her, stroked her hair and kissed the side of her head and promised, everything will be okay, Sarah. And Sarah did her very best to believe. Everything was not okay. Complications? Sarah's voice shook. Her body trembled. Her heart was a stalled, useless engine sputtering to death inside her chest. She felt shaken and stirred and too scattered to function. The loss of Teresa, the gain of Tally, the loss of Tally, and the gain of Alice. Sarah was wiped, off kilter, terrified, and Tally was gone, taken from her. You're saying she's Tally's. Oh, no, no, General, Isadora was quick to correct, but Sarah's heart remained motionless. Her breath remained stuck just at the back of her tongue, refusing to go down, choking. Tally is fine. She survived the procedure, General. I apologize. I should have clarified that first. Yes, Tally is fine. Well, she's alive. There were complications, perhaps due to the added effects of the soul bond you share with her. It is, after all, quite rare, but Isadora, Sarah barked, and she was no longer trembling. She was positively vibrating. Now that she focused, she could feel Tally in her chest, feel that tug, that thread she becomes so fond of. So she knew Tally was alive, but something was wrong. She was wrong. Get to the goddess damn point. What has happened to Tally? Isadora quickly tightened her posture and cleared her throat, squeezed her clipboard to her chest like it was armor. I think perhaps it's best if I just show you, General. Sarah wasn't sure what she was expecting when she entered the infirmary. Tally comatose, perhaps? Tally caught somewhere between her elder self and her natural youth? Tally broken by the sacrifice she'd made for Sarah's life? For the beat of a heart that had already gone on for far too long? Tally, another casualty to add to the wreckage, the body count, the debris? Whatever it wasn't even within reach of what Sarah actually found when she rounded the white curtain hanging around Tally's bed. Her boots squeaked against the tiled floor as she came to a harsh stop, and Sarah felt her eyes widening, bulging. Her stomach screamed as her heart began to hammer, and a chorus of gasps sang through her head, the biddies all just as mind-boggled as she. This... how? She barely managed to choke free. But before Isadora could even attempt to answer, big, familiar brown eyes blinked open, bigger now, like wide cartoon doe eyes on a small, round face. Tally stretched dramatically, all 3.5 feet of her. Her pudgy little hands pushed her too long, too wild auburn hair out of her face and rubbed at her sleepy eyes. Her cheeks were pillowy, plumped by baby fat, and they dimpled adorably when her gaze finally settled on Sarah. "My Sarah," she said, only her voice wasn't her voice. It was a child's voice, sweet and small and warped by the limits of a still learning tongue, and the R in Sarah's name sounded more like a W, and Sarah was near certain she'd never breathe again. And then the tiny red and white ball that was Tally Craven in a severely oversized hospital gown messily crawled onto her feet on the bed and leapt recklessly towards Sarah. Sarah fumbled, shocked, but managed to catch her just in time and scooped her up into her arms. Tally immediately settled onto Sarah's hip, her squishy thighs squeezing around Sarah's waist, and her hands finding their way to Sarah's cheeks. She squashed Sarah's cheeks between her little palms and said, "So grumpy." And Sarah stood, frozen. She stared, shocked. How old is she? My guess would be, Isadora began, but Tally quickly cut her off again by smacking her little forehead against Sarah's and pressing the tips of their noses together. "I'm 5," she said seriously. "Do you know how many 5 is?" "5?" Kate's voice shattered the shocked stillness of Sarah's mind. "How are we supposed to manage being soul bonded to a 5-year-old?" "Isadora will fix this," Savannah soothed, always the calm one, the rational one. Sarah's compass. "You've always had faith in her, Sarah. Have faith in her now." "Yes," Sarah stuttered, an answer for both Tally and her biddies. She was so painfully torn between being utterly charmed by this small, precious witch and utterly horrified by the complications of this particular turn of events, and what it would mean for both Sarah and Tally if they couldn't be reversed. She cleared her throat, tried to summon some measure of composure, decorum, support. This was still Tally, her Tally, squishing Sarah's cheeks and bumping Sarah's nose and kicking her little legs happily back and forth through the air. "Yes, I do know how many 5 is, Tally. That is a wonderful age. Sarah looked to Isadora again, only to receive a pained sort of grimace. I will begin researching immediately, General. See that you do. Sarah's voice was thick, a lump bobbing and choking and running the length of her throat. Yeah, and in the meantime, our soulmate is 5. Kate groaned. What could possibly go wrong? I'm confident there is an explanation, Isadora attempted to reassure, but Sarah was beyond that point. Nothing could reassure her, nothing could soothe, not even a small, sweet girl's hands on her face or a dimpled little smile. She had promised Tally her youth back. This was indeed more youth than she had intended. And where there is an explanation, there may also lie a remedy. Sarah didn't respond. Her face was occupied by the red-headed gremlin attached to her hip, batting her eyelashes against Sarah's and whispering, "Butterfly kisses." "Help! She's so cute!" Ember's voice crackled through Sarah's head like a hammer taken to glass, shattering the tension, and Sarah released the most ridiculous strained laugh of her life. She didn't know what she felt. She didn't know how to feel. But yes, this tiny, sweet-hearted Tally was ridiculously, unfairly cute. Goddess protect, Sarah thought, and the biddies echoed her prayer. I'll need to have a look at the biddy structure again, Isadora said. The sooner the better if you're up for it, General. Sarah was just about to agree when the doors to the infirmary burst open, and Abigail and Rael streamed in with shocked, blown eyes and jaws flapping comically against their chests. "No fucking way!" Rael said, managing words where Abigail could only summon a strangled sort of gurgle in her throat. Tally bounced on Sarah's hip when she saw them, but then lay her head down sweetly, cheek against Sarah's shoulder, as Sarah turned to face the 2 soldiers. "Hi, Way," she said, though it sounded more like Way. Then, "Hi, Aggie." "Aggie?" Rael squeaked, gaze shooting towards Abigail. "Is that you? Are you Aggie?" "Oh, hell no," Abigail finally managed. Then her troubled gaze met Sarah. "With all due respect, ma'am, I know someone better be fixing this shit. Like, yesterday." "Oh," Tally giggled and cupped a wee hand over her mouth. "Aggie mad!" And Sarah was certain of 2 things. 1, she desperately wanted her Tally back. The Tally she'd taken in her arms at Beltane. The Tally she kissed under starlight and felt in her soul like flame. The Tally she shared her bed with and whispered to at night, made promises and confessions to. The Tally she'd given her heart and given her body and was determined to share her life with. And 2, this Tally, this small, adorable 5-year-old version of Tally, still stupidly, preciously, and absolutely owned Sarah's heart. Sarah squeezed the small witch tight to her chest and nuzzled her nose into her ginger hair. She locked gazes with Isadora over a small gown-covered shoulder and softly intoned what Aggie said. And in the haze of the odd, strange laughter that followed, Isadora running off to do as told, and Abigail and Rael trying to find some sort of comfort in Sarah's joke, Sarah felt her small girl's hands on her face again. She looked down into big, round, brown eyes and felt her heart swell. Tally was smiling at her, oversized dimples sinking into her small face and chubby fingers tracing over Sarah's lips. "Sarah." "Yes, my love?" Sarah asked and patted Tally's small, warm back. "What is it?" "I need some pudding." Sarah blinked, surprised, then barked out a loud laugh and kissed Tally's puffy cheek. "Then pudding you shall have, soldier." "If only all of our problems could be solved with pudding," Yarrow said, and Sarah huffed, sighed, strangled herself with emotions she couldn't process and couldn't swallow. She couldn't recall the last time she felt so intensely, violently off-key, so awfully out of tune. The thread in her chest was tugging, strained. It wasn't right. It wasn't how it was meant to be, but soon. If she could just have a little faith, like Tally. For Tally. Yes, if only.
Please find the fanfiction you just listened to on Archive of Our Own, and leave the author some love. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we want to thank them from the bottoms of our hearts for creating these amazing stories and keeping the show alive.